I've had a dream of doing a TEDx for about 10 years, and the fact that I get to do it for young people means the world to me. As a youth advocate, I believe deeply that when young people feel better, they can do better. How we feel directly impacts how we show up, and that is specifically connected to our learning. Learning and growing is hard. You already know this. It's a challenging thing, and it's even harder when we have internal obstacles that come up prevent us from really leaning and engaging with what we're trying to learn. Now, I want to tell you all a story about a student that I had that really illuminated one of the hidden enemies of learning that I did not realize until this moment. I was working at a middle school and I had to push in as a support teacher to a seventh grade math class. Now, as a support teacher, I'm basically there to help people one on one if the teacher is working with the larger group. And I was a little bit anxious about it because, to tell you the truth, math makes me want to cry a lot of the time, mainly because of how it makes me feel. I don't have anything against numbers. I just don't like doing math because it's not one of my strong suits and I don't like how it makes me feel. But they were learning a new equation, and the teacher told me that he had a trick that I could use with the students that would help them if they got stuck. So he taught me the trick, and then I was ready to help them. I was super excited, looking for my redemption story, a chance to do some math in a good way with some young people. And the kids came into class, and he gave them individual practice sheets where they were going to be working on this new type of equation. Now, they were supposed to be doing this alone. It was just a practice sheet. But as I was walking around and they started, I noticed that one of the students was messing with the student next to him. So I had to be the annoying teacher and go over and say, "Hey, is everything okay?" He shrugged me off, and I thought, okay, he was just getting a little bored or distracted. It's fine. A couple moments later, I noticed that he is again messing with the same student. And I went back over and said, "Hey, listen, I'm here to help you. He's trying to do his work. So, like, let's let him work and I will help you." Now, he got an attitude out of nowhere. And I was not expecting that because he's not a student that would normally do that. And so I said, "Okay, cool. I'm going to back off because the last thing I want to do is get into an argument or debate you in a moment like this." So I walked away. I kept watching as the minutes passed by, and I noticed that he was not working, but he was no longer messing with the person next to him. He was just sitting there. At the end, the person that he was bothering came up to me to turn his practice sheet in, but he left a note. And the note said, "Please go back and help him. He's really struggling." Now, I think that that is a huge thing to do, a young person to advocate for another person, especially because these guys were not friends. So I tried to go back over and help him, but this time I wanted to approach it a little differently. I said, "Hey, listen, I learned a trick earlier that made this really easy, and let me just show you it and see if that makes this process easier for you." I went through the process with him. I showed him. I thought that I had done a pretty good job of explaining it to him. But as soon as I was done and I asked him if he understood, he had a huge reaction. Really felt like it came out of nowhere. He got super mad. He started yelling at me, told me to leave him alone. And eventually he got removed from the class. Now, I'm a huge proponent for restorative conversations. Obviously, I had upset him. Something in this classroom had upset him, and I wanted to get to the bottom of it once he had cooled down. We talked for a while. I had to pull some teeth to kind of get to the reason of why he was feeling the way he was feeling. And he just told me that he was super frustrated because he didn't get it. And as we continued to dig and think about what feelings were coming up for him, he admitted that he felt embarrassed. No one else was asking for help. He was thinking that he was the only person in the room that didn't get that. And that felt deeply uncomfortable to him and made him very mad. Now, having reactions or having feelings are totally okay, but we are responsible for reactions. So I said, "Was it worth getting kicked out of the classroom for that?" He told me that he would rather be kicked out of the classroom than have people think that he didn't know something. That's how ashamed he was of struggling with doing this work. Now, I thought about this moment a lot because I'm always wondering about our behaviors. Our behaviors are basically just coming from a place of how we're feeling and our needs. And what I realized is that there was an invisible enemy that was coming up for him that I see in people all the time. And that enemy is ego. Now, I know ego probably has negative sound to it. When we hear ego, a lot of people jump to negative thoughts, but let me just explain to you really what ego is. Ego is essentially a defense mechanism that our brains have created to keep us safe. They keep us in our comfort zones where things are known and predictable. It tries to protect our sense of ourselves by trying to prevent us from feeling rejected or hurt. And when I think about ego when it comes to learning, learning is a practice of vulnerability. Learning requires us to say, I don't know something, to challenge our beliefs, to recognize that we are struggling or maybe even suffering with trying to grasp a concept. And all of those things can leave us feeling a lot of self doubt or feeling really negative about ourselves. Now, when we think about learning and what it requires from us, our ego is designed again to protect us from those feelings. And so, what happens a lot of times is when those feelings start to arise, our ego steps in and creates barriers that prevent us from actually learning. When we feel doubt and inadequate, our ego wants to prevent us from feeling those deep feelings of hurt. And that is something that is basically us just trying to protect ourselves. But what happens is we lose an opportunity to learn because the ego is boxing us in. When we think about self-protection, we have to figure out, where does this come from? This is not just an individual student that had something wrong with him. This is a very common experience that happens with a lot of people. And I think specifically around the grading system. I think it starts all the way back with education. When we think about grades, we can probably understand that grades are designed to just let us know where we're at with our learning, where we're at with our learning experience, our engagement, if we're connected or disconnected, engaged or disengaged. But for a lot of people, there's an underlying belief that good grades make me good, bad grades make me bad. So a young person who is struggling to understand concepts can turn that towards themselves and start to feel really negatively, or start to act out and turn that against other people. This is not just something that we see in kids. And I want to own this because a lot of times we talk about kids, but we don't realize that these same behaviors appear with adults. All you have to do is open any social media app, go to the comment section, and within 10 minutes, I can pretty much guarantee you that you are going to find a battle of knowledge. I'm right, you're wrong. And more importantly, there's also shaming that happens. Our culture intentionally and unintentionally tries to use shame as a learning tool. And though shame does serve its purpose in some situations, shame when it comes to learning is actually a lot less powerful of a motivator than we think that it is. That's because shame breeds fear and guilt. If we feel fearful or we feel guilty, if we feel like we are being threatened, our sense of ourself is being threatened, then that's when the ego steps in to protect us. I think a little bit about how we show up, our behaviors show up. When that shame starts to feel bad and we don't want to acknowledge that we're struggling or that we don't understand something, shame can show up in lots of different ways. It can show up like acting out, it can be arguing, it could be shutting down, it could be pretending that you know something. People pretending that they know is a huge one I see all the time, or refusing help even when we need it. Now, if we want people to embrace learning, we have to recognize two things. One, that ego is present and that ego is going to do its best to try to protect us from the uncomfortable feelings that come up when we are learning. And the second thing is that we need a tool. We need a tool and a skill that we can teach people so they can combat that ego to really engage with the learning and take away what they're supposed to take. Now, out of all the tools I teach young people, this is my favorite one, and it's surprising. Some people would not think about this when it comes to learning, but that tool is self-compassion. Self-compassion is being kind and understanding towards ourselves when we feel like we're not enough or inadequate, when we fail, or when we suffer. Now, I do a lot of work around self-compassion because I help young people try to take care of themselves. And like I said, growing includes all of those things, but growing and learning are very connected professionally and personally and academically. Dr. Kristen Neff is one of the leading American psychologists who is currently studying self-compassion and the impact that it has on people's emotional, mental well-being. She has found through her work that people who more consistently practice self-compassion than others experience more feelings of happiness, optimism, curiosity, and even connectedness. Her research also found that people who practice self-compassion experience less anxiety, less depression, less rumination or thinking about negative thoughts over and over again, and fear of failure. Now, learning requires failing, it requires risk taking, and it requires curiosity. So, self compassion is a great tool to help combat the ego who aims to prevent all of those things. Now, she describes self compassion as three main components, which I want to tell you about now. The first component is mindfulness, the second component is self kindness, and the third one is humanity. But where does this come into play with us learning? The way that I approach self compassion and learning is thinking about how we can use all three of these components to really take care of ourselves in those tough moments when we are really in it, when we are being challenged, when something feels difficult, when we're trying to learn something new. And the steps that I go through first are thinking about mindfulness. Mindfulness is super important because it allows us to recognize that these negative emotions are coming up. It doesn't deny these uncomfortable feelings, but instead it allows us to be aware of them so we don't get swept away with them. It can help us recognize when our ego is creating barriers to learning, such as negative self talk, defensive behaviors, and harsh self criticism. You may have heard of this phrase called inner critic. The inner critic is someone that puts a lot of pressure and is super tough on ourselves. And the inner critic loves to show up when we're doing something challenging and hard. So, using mindfulness allows us to be aware that that is popping up and to know what to do with it. The next step is thinking about now that we know that these things are coming up for us, we're going to practice self kindness. Self kindness allows us to tend to those harsh inner critic voices that like to pop up in our heads when we're confronted with feelings of self doubt and our abilities. In learning, our inner critic can blame ourselves or other people. It can create resentment to what we're trying to learn or the whole process, and it can encourage unhelpful self judgment. So once we've recognized that these things are coming up for us, we started to treat ourselves with self-kindness. The last piece is our humanity. Humanity means recognizing that part of the human experience is imperfection. Connecting to our humanity helps normalize mistakes and it normalizes failures as an essential part of our growth. It shows us that struggling to learn is part of all of our experiences. It helps us feel less isolated when we realize that we are not alone in the pursuit of our knowledge and all the ups and downs that come with it. Thinking about self compassion when it comes to learning is super important because practicing this skill can help us soothe that ego so that we can lean deeper into the uncomfortable waters of learning. And we all know that that's where the real growth happens. When we practice self compassion, we're not only taking care of ourselves in the moment, but we're also setting ourselves up for more growth in the future. It can provide us with opportunities to develop a stronger sense of curiosity and a love of learning. When we become better at handling the challenges of learning, we change our relationship with learning altogether and we put ourselves on track to become lifelong learners. There's been a lot of research done about people who consider themselves lifelong learners and the impact that it's had on them. And the research has found that being a lifelong learner has lots of benefits. It can help you achieve more personal and professional fulfillment. You have higher levels of self worth and even a better quality of life. It can improve the health and function of our brains. We can develop more critical thinking skills. We can increase our capacity to adapt. We can build deeper connections and relationships, raise our levels of self awareness, and even create more solutions for the many problems that our society is facing today. I think deeply about how tough it is to feel and learn how to grow. And like we've heard today in some of these other speeches, life is tough, and no one knows that more than you all right now in this moment in your life. And I hope for you that you continue to be good to yourself and to be kind and to be gentle with yourself so that you can develop a healthy relationship with learning. Learning should not stop when you leave school. Your formal education may end, but there is so much more in the world and about you for you to go out there and learn about. And right now, what we need is people who are committed to lifelong learning. So I want you to, next time you're learning something new, if you recognize that some of these things are coming up, some negative feelings are coming up, you're starting to doubt yourself, you're starting to be tough on yourself, compare yourself to other people, just remember these three steps. One, be mindful of these emotions and understand that these feelings are not you. The second one is to, when you have these feelings come up, practice self kindness to yourself, be gentle, forgive yourself. And the last one is never forget that you are not alone in your learning. Your humanity connects all of us together. If we as a society can expand and grow more and learn and expand and grow more intellectually, then we can grow great together. I'm so grateful for you all. Thank you all so much for being here in this space today. Thank you for the hard work that you've been doing. Go out there and learn as much as you can because we are counting on you.